In this example, I'm going to show you how to run ComfyUI from prototype to production on Modal. So the first step is just to spin up ComfyUI on Modal infrastructure. First thing you're going to do is sign up for a Modal account and clone our examples repo. And then once you're in there, you can just run modal serve ComfyUI, this ComfyUI example. So while that spins up, what this is doing is in this file, you can specify custom checkpoints. In this file, custom plugins here, and it'll build a ComfyUI image at a bespoke URL that you can use to build your workflow. So here it is. And the example I have preloaded up is the ComfyUI in-painting example. So in this example, you can start with this image. Oops. Start with an image that has like a blob you want to fill in with a prompt. So I'm going to try to fill in that blob with a picture of a white heron, and then I can just hit Q prompt. And this is all running, as you can see, on Modal's infrastructure. So this solving a lot of issues you may run into trying to install the software locally. And here we go. So this is a good playground for getting started with ComfyUI in a fast and affordable way. So once you have your workflow in a good place, your next step here is to export this workflow as an API-compatible JSON. So to do that, you first have to click on this gear icon here, enable dev mode options, and you'll see the option to export it, the Save API Format button. So click that. This will download your workflow as a JSON object, and this is the representation of your workflow, and you're going to want to copy that into this workflow API.json file here in the examples repo. So now that your workflow is in this JSON, you can actually directly make requests to a running ComfyUI server by passing this JSON to that server and changing the prompts to handle user input, etc. And you can actually find an example to do that in Comfy API in our examples, this query Comfy via API. This is adapted from the official ComfyUI script example. That being said, we don't recommend this as a way to productionize your workflow for kind of two main reasons. One, you have to spin up the ComfyUI server separately in a separate process. And two, just kind of managing JSON, especially with like parameterizing JSON, is kind of annoying. So the next step we're going to do is going to use this helper function to translate this JSON workflow into some like starter Python code and basically translate one of these JSON nodes into a Python object and show you how to query the ComfyUI repository effectively as a Python package. So the way you're going to do that is you're going to go to this 06 GPU and ML folder, and you can see we have this ComfyUI folder here, and we're going to run this helper function. It's modal run ComfyUI .comfy API get Python workflow. So what this is doing is let's look at the code, get Python workflow. So this is using the ComfyUI to Python extension package that will read in the JSON and export out this generated workflow API.py as a Python representation. So I've already run this, and this is kind of the output. There's a bunch of boilerplate here that we won't need necessarily in the next step. It's not exactly like executable as is, but the key part of this file is this main function. And sort of this shows you how the specific JSON nodes map to these different Python objects from Comfy. So we're going to basically, the next step is going to adapt the code that's generated from here into a Modal web endpoint that will serve and receive requests. To stand up our workflow behind a web endpoint, first we have to do some Modal boilerplate, importing the image from the first example, defining a stub name, and we're also going to create a volume, which is where we're going to write the generated images. Then we're going to copy over a helper function from the generated file. We're also going to write our own helper function to download images from a URL that we'll get in a request. This will serve as our input image. And this is the meat of the code, this run Python workflow. I've basically adapted this from main in the generated workflow API code. You can see we're importing the custom nodes from the Comfy repository, and here we're building the workflow and handling the prompt and image input. And this is the actual web endpoint code. It's very concise. This will stand up a web endpoint that receives post requests containing the input image and the prompt. So to stand up the endpoints, we're going to run modal serve. So this is the URL, and I'm going to do a curl request in another terminal. So here I'm hitting that endpoint, and here's my prompt and my input image. So this is, we'll go to the server again. You can see it's triggering the workflow here. And our ComfyUI workflow is starting here. It's going to run for a little bit. All right, our ComfyUI workflow is finished running. And if we go back to the client, we can see that it saved the image at this volume. So to download the image, we'll run volume get ComfyUI-images. Okay, and this writes the image here. Here is our generated image. So now you're ready to run ComfyUI in production on Modal.